It's time to give my brother 260 a good basic cleaning, and I thought you might like to watch. Here's how I realized it was time. This kind of thing does happen. Last time I used it, it was perfectly fine. An attempt to cast on resulted in this. A close examination shows that some needles are not meeting properly. That closure should close right onto the hook, and it's askew. The yarn tore, and I can feel that the needles are floppy in their channels. These can be symptoms of several things. The bad needle could just be an isolated bad needle. The looseness in the channels on the part of all the needles could just be the need to change a sponge bar. The machine was deep cleaned a year or so ago, so it really is time to give it a little bit of attention. Clean all of the needles, repair or replace the bad ones, and the bed some cleaning and lubrication. Doing it now is a relatively small job and will forestall the necessity for a deeper cleaning later. Sometimes you can use a pair of pliers to correct a needle that is not meeting correctly, very gently twisting the flat part that comes out from the hinge so it closes properly over the hook. I'll do that here, and it looks like the needle may go back to work nicely. We'll find out after we've taken them all out and cleaned them and tried to knit again. First, let's get the old sponge bar out and have a look. The channel is accessible from both ends of the machine. I used a single prong tool to poke from the right, moving towards the left, so as to be able to get a hold of a piece of it on the left and pull it out. You can go from either direction unless the bar is so badly damaged that it won't go one direction. That's not common in a well-maintained machine. That's something you would find in an estate machine that hadn't been looked after in a while. The sponge bar is out, and yes, it is too old. It doesn't have any bounce. You may see that the foam is resuming the tall shape it should actually have, more like at this end. And that happens sometimes, which will fool you into thinking the sponge bar is fine. It's not fine. It needs to be firm and bouncy enough to press down on the needles in order to do its job. And even if it does grow back in height, this one won't do it anymore. Now we need to clean that sponge bar channel, and we use a rat tail brush. This is a wire brush with a curly cue of bristles on one end and a very long twisted wire handle. It's quite sturdy. I'm now inserting the brush from the right and pushing it across the bed through the channel. And although the needles do lay flat on the beds, sometimes you do need to press them down somewhat to let that brush through. Here it comes through again in slow motion. I apologize for the fact that I was unable to get the camera stand completely out of the way. I'm afraid it took me several tries to get a picture of it coming through at all. On the other end of the machine, the wire loop is still in your hand, and what you want to do is twist it as you withdraw the brush. Here we are going in. And this time I'm doing it without the needles in position. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Twisting out, and all this crud comes with it. It's usually productive to clean it off and then go in and out of the channel several more times, withdrawing more dust and fiber as you go. And eventually, when it comes out with hardly any noticeable fiber, it's time to stop. Now, about doing it without the needles in position. It's generally not recommended, but I decided to do it. The thing is, the needles are helping to define the position where the sponge bar actually goes, and that's where most of the fuzz is. If you do as I did and insert the brush without the needles in position, the brush has the option of going all sorts of places other than where you actually had in mind, and it may pull out more crud, which mine did. But it's also possible that the brush will take a turn that means it doesn't come out the other end. So you'll have to withdraw it and try again if you went the wrong direction. I don't actually know of any grievous harm that could come from it, but if your brush gets stuck because you took out the needles and ran it in again, Don't be surprised, that's why a lot more space has opened up inside. With the sponge bar out and the channel cleaned out, we can now remove the needles. First, bring one or more all the way forward, close the latch, lift on the back end, and pull out. I am often successful getting 2 or 3 out at a time, but today it's not working for me because I'm trying to keep out of your view and I can't grab properly at the same time, it appears. It is quite important that the latches be closed so as not to snag on anything on their way out. And we remove all of the needles in the bed. Once they're out, we give them a good examination to see what is the condition of most of them. How dirty are they? Are the little hinges that allow the latches to open and close impacted with crud or not? If there were a lot in really poor condition, I would soak them all in Marvel Mystery Oil. Here's one that really deserves it. This is bad. I can barely close the latch with my fingers. And if I shake it, try to close it, nothing happens. Now, asking the machine to knit with that is unfair. It's not going to work well. Happily, there was only that one, so what I'm going to do is hand clean. You would have to do this anyway after soaking them in Marvel Mystery Oil if that were necessary. I don't knit with mystery oil in the machine or on the needles. We wash it off with LPS1. LPS1 is the more cleansing of the 2 LPS products we use. They both clean and they both lubricate to some degree, but the LPS1 is the stronger cleaner and it's not as durable a lubricant. So what I'm doing is checking the latches, seeing what attention they need, looking for grubby spots, filing them off if I see any. These are very fine files, not aggressive at all. Making sure that the latches move freely. If I see any black or brown spots along the shaft of the needle, I file those off. Such spots may possibly be dried lubricant or they may possibly be rust or corrosion. Either way, they make a spot that's not smooth, and the machine doesn't like that. It'll make it act sluggish, possibly hang up on yarn. Altogether, it improves performance to make sure the needles are as slick and as smooth and as free moving as you can make them. I usually don't go for cosmetically absolutely perfect. It's really hard to do, and it's not absolutely necessary. A little staining doesn't really impact performance, and older metals do tend to stain a little bit. But you do want your hand to be unable to find anything rough on the needles, and those latches must move freely. These needles were not especially bad, but you can certainly see that every time I use one of my wipes to clean them off, a little bit of dirt is deposited on the wipe. In a basic cleaning, we want to get rid of that. In addition to a very fine file, you can also use some steel wool. If you do use steel wool, clean carefully afterwards because those little fibers of steel wool will cling to the needle and they don't cause anything good if you let those steel fibers get into the machine. After cleaning up all 110 needles and manually checking the action of each one, I have this pile of a somewhat dirty rag and sparkly needles, so that's good. Here's what we use to clean the exterior of the needle bed. It has always worked for us without causing any harm. And that's the main thing. Different people use different things and they feel very strongly about them. I'm telling you what has worked for years for us. If you choose something different, that's fine. Just make sure to find out, is it compatible with all of the substances we're using? We're using chromed steel in this case, but there are also nylon parts. I'm not even sure what the needle strip is made of, some kind of plastic, but specifically what, I do not know. These wipes don't remove the numbers and they do remove the crud, so that works for me. They also do a good job on the steel surfaces. They don't scratch. They seem to be a strong enough solvent to get off all the nastiness. They don't leave a noticeable residue. It's important that whatever you use not leave a residue that combines with your lubricant and does something unpleasant. Our recommendations were given to us by a chemical engineer, so we had a nice head start. If you don't have that advantage, you will need to read the MSDS sheet, which every manufacturer in both the US and Europe is required to provide online. If this were a deep clean, I would go into the case, take it off, and use this same product inside to wash out all the crud I could reach with it, and then everywhere that I could reach with a manual tool, wipe off the old fiber and any old oxidized lubricant that was present. I'm not going into the case now, but I am going to spray the cleaning solution generously. It may possibly wash small amounts of debris down into the bottom of the case. I don't mind because this machine stays stationary at all times. I would not do what I just did and then take the machine on the road. Next time I deep clean, I'll have to clean out whatever is down in the case because of what I just did. Most people stick the number strip back down with just a little bit of the same thing they use to lubricate, and that normally works just fine. Now I'm going to lubricate with what we usually use. This is the food-grade silicone lubricant. We often get asked if another food-grade silicone is appropriate, and the answer is we really don't know. You must read your MSDS. Remember the rule of thumb. Your product must be safe for all the materials it will touch. And then there's the performance issue. This one was recommended for us, and it performs well for us. I've tried some things that should be safe, but I didn't like the way they performed. So you'll have to make a judgment call. Now we reinsert the needles. Open the latch, tip the needle with its rear end up, bring it forward, and then back into position. If there are any needles that you kept but found questionable because you're still waiting for a fresh order to arrive, I suggest putting them on the ends. That way you'll only need them if you're making blankets and larger garments, and it'll buy you a little time while you wait for your replacements. What I had hoped to be doing now is inserting a fresh sponge bar, but it turns out that I don't have one in the studio. So I am trying out the I-cord trick that sometimes allows us to substitute an I-cord for a sponge bar. I will make another movie on that and show you how it works.